live button.
None of these clocks.
We are live and back from our break, and we're on page 4 of this housing bill.
64 page.
Yeah.
That's okay.
This one's only 56 pages.
I just figured out what said head guy is.
Yes, I think we say SEDGA or we say Senate Econ, but yes, that's us.
Okay.
Do we have the longest title? Do we win that?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Well, I don't know, we're just finance, but if we put everything we were responsible for in it, have a longer time.
All right, page 4, line 3, subdivision 13. So we're still in the zoning section. In any district served by municipal water and sewer infrastructure that allows residential development, any mixed-use developments and affordable housing developments, as defined in the definition section, may exceed building height limitations by 1 additional habitable floor beyond the maximum height, and using that additional floor may exceed density limitations for residential developments by an additional 40%, provided that the structure complies with Vermont Fire and Building Safety Code. So not all towns structure their zoning like this, but some towns do have height restrictions on buildings and density restrictions. And so in the last section, we did establish that this bill establishes that towns have to establish 5 units per dwelling, 5 units of dwellings per acre. So what this is essentially setting up is a height and density bonus for affordable and mixed use development.
How many additional fire trucks will we have to buy?
That has come up at Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Oh my gosh, Hancock. Or no, Montgomery. It's Charlie Hancock from Montgomery.
Okay.
Raised that issue of, they're restricted by their fire capabilities.
Well, I
So-
know downtown, in the downtown district, there's an architectural streetscape where the buildings are all supposed to be of similar height. The 13-story building proposal didn't go anywhere in Montpelier. And if you look at Montpelier streetscape and then you go look at Barry's, where they've obviously had something taken down and a 1-story put up as opposed to the ones around it are 2 and 3. There is an architectural, you'll get, design review will have some issues with that. If everything is like that and then you get that, it'll depend on how it's worked in.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll discuss, I think, historic preservation and other folks
Yes,
get
they
to trump a
will
lot of other
also
people.
have
So,
issues with that.
but we have heard these
Streetscape,
higher, like skyline.
yeah, you want you can't put vinyl cornices on your 4th floor in Montpelier because they won't weather in the same way, meaning they won't peel like the old wooden ones. It does go to extremes.
That's a whole nother bill that we could probably introduce.
We did have one very strong advocate.
But this particular provision, though, the height issue, doing the arc, I imagine there's going to be pushback from some municipalities who don't have a fire truck that will reach 1 story higher.
And that's exactly, we are hearing that from smaller
Yeah, if you're
towns,
going
so-
from 2 to 3,
Yeah.
that's a $3 million truck.
Right, so we, it says the
It's a separate
structure
thing now.
complies with fire and safety code. It might be, that it can
Might
comply
need
with
some more
local fire
language.
safety regulations.
Yeah, or capacity.
Yeah, that is something we.
Well, it says the Vermont building fire. so
Exactly.
It doesn't say anything
We
about
might
municipalities issues
Mhm.
relating to fire
You have to
safety.
have wide, yeah, because you've got fire, water pressure for a fire load, which
Mhm.
means, so if you're up another story, that we have a condo development that has a pool to meet the fire pressure codes.
Mhm.
That was before we put a tower up over there. Yeah, there's water pressure and fire requirements that are, you have to have fire pressure if every house in the town flushes the toilet at exactly the same minute. You still have to be able to maintain enough water pressure for a hose. And I assume somehow that is it has to go up higher, that can get altered, so.
Yeah, I think, so VLCT is coming in soon after we finish the walkthrough, and they will make this, it's a good thing to ask them to remind them that they have smaller types of
I didn't
braces.
wear mine.
And we have my Shirosher somewhere on our radar to come in for fire safety as well. Senator Harrison.
Just a question about the 40%. So using that additional floor may exceed density limitations for residential developments by an additional 40%. So does that mean that the part of the building that would be required anyway uses 60%, say, and so this or 100%, and then this is 40% of what the other, sorry, I'm not saying
Yeah,
it
so
right, but
it's-
what the rest of the building uses.
So it would be, it's intended to be a density bonus, and if you assume that based on the prior section, 5 units per acre is the density that is required, or not, that can't be exceeded. 40% of 5 units is 2 units, and so in theory, this is saying if you're building affordable housing, you can build an additional floor to house an additional 2 units.
Okay, that's helpful.
And we could potentially wordsmith it a little bit more. Drafting a density bonus is kind of awkward because towns structure it different, so we had to sort of take into account. Some towns restrict the number of floors, some
Yeah, I was
restrict the
gonna say.
actual number of feet that you can build up to, so.
The most famous being Philadelphia, where you couldn't build above William Penn.
That wasn't a lot of,
Ben
that was
Franklin or-
a gentleman's
Yeah,
agreement.
on the top of the State House,
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
I mean, that was,
and then it changed.
Well, there's a whole, you better get Senator Mars in here about blocking the view of the Gold Dome.
oh,
He
yeah.
still
We'll
hates
never do
the
that.
credit.
Well, you can
Oh,
have view sheds.
well, he may hate it, but it got built.
It got built.
When
So-
some of
and
these
they
questions
gave
come up,
us
it's where
fun.
a lot of us miss our whiteboards that we used to have in here, because we
Oh.
things
Oh.
when math was involved better.
So you are using maximum height here in
Yes,
terms
yeah.
of feet.
Yeah.
Okay, the thing I want to make sure we don't inadvertently create are ghettos. You know, we did housing projects. We segregated poor people. Other areas, they segregated people of color. And into high density, high height, but you segregated them. We've gone to mixed market rate, mixed value. We've gone to mixed use, but I think we want to make sure that high density housing is not all good. I mean, my family started in the tenements, you know,
I
and
think that's
just make sure
fair.
that we
Yeah.
don't
right.
incentivize it so much
Right.
that we end up not learning from the mistakes
Yes,
of the
right.
past.
We've started
Good
to hear
point.
from our affordable housing folks, and I think we'll hear from them again, that they try to be very sensitive to that. And
Right.
some of those buildings, you see that achieve some form of density, might be supportive housing, you know, where they're not using income, but they're using a particular thematic need, veterans, mental health issues, transitional supportive recovery. But yeah,
I mean, you don't want to have a lot of high needs people stuck together. I mean, you
not
just,
stuck. Yeah.
but I mean,
Right.
they're all packed in one
Mhm.
space, and then the rest of the town.
Yeah, we can hear about the larger projects and how they're unfolding. I mean, I'm half a mile away from Harbor Place, which is taking motel properties and making it, you know,
Yes,
supportive and
that's one of the
transitional.
places my homeless lady was trying to get.
Right, so, you know, sometimes the volume helps with a place and a platform for, rather than being on the streets, et cetera, but we'll make sure that that concern is addressed in our workplace.
Okay,
Be on
page,
my
page
14
four,
activity.
line 10.
Okay.
One more subdivision in this section. So no bylaw shall have the effect of limiting the square footage of a duplex that otherwise complies with the applicable building code. So again, we're making sure that towns treat duplexes similarly to other homes. Okay, section 3 is a topic shift, although it's still in the municipal zoning realm. So 4413 is limitations on zoning bylaws. And so this section that I'm going to talk about is specific to homeless shelters. So we'll walk through this, but just so you know, this is specific provisions for homeless shelters. So the following uses may only be regulated with respect to size, location, height, building bulk, yards, courts, setbacks, density of buildings, off-street parking, loading facilities, traffic, noise, lighting, landscaping, and screening requirements, and only to the extent that the regulations do not have the effect of interfering with the intended functional use. That's existing language, and there is a list of things that follow these regulations. So in the prior sections, we talked about zoning. Zoning is gives town very broad discretion of what elements of a building or development they can restrict or put parameters on. This is limiting it to a subset of criteria that towns are allowed to weigh in on for these specific types of facilities. So the existing list includes state or community owned institutions, on page 5, public and private schools, churches, public-private hospitals, regional solid waste facilities, hazardous waste management facilities, and this is adding a new item to the list, emergency shelters. The definition of that is on the next page, so I will get to it in a moment. So it's adding emergency shelters, so this means that towns can only regulate emergency shelters, which are essentially homeless shelters, based on those criteria I listed on page 5. So they are limited in how they can regulate homeless shelters. And then additionally, on page 5, line 18, there's a new provision added related to this that says, for the purposes of this subsection, regulating the daily or seasonal hours of operation of an emergency shelter shall constitute interfering with the intended functional use. This is adding another layer to make sure that it's clear that towns can't regulate the daily and seasonal hours of operation of an emergency shelter.
Very popular in big cities and towns.
No guess. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Just to be clear on what's proposed, so that means like overnight.
24-hour a day
operation
homeless shelter.
Or emergency shelter.
or emergency shelter.
So it applies for when we had Irene and our emergency shelter, our elementary school was now then in operation 24 hours.
So wait, the definition, I'm gonna get to the definition on the next page.
Of emergency shelter.
Yes, it's very specific. Emergency shelter in a state emergency or disaster is defined actually elsewhere in section.
Oh, is
statute.
It's very
Yes.
different than a
It's
homeless shelter.
Oh, yeah, Vermont College is the emergency shelter in the flood here in National White. No way is Vermont College neighborhood gonna have a homeless shelter on that college
Do you-
campus.
So,
Do you want to jump to the definition so we can talk about it?
yeah, no, I'm just curious, why do we use the term if it's not the same?
I will tell you. So that was.
No, that's why you're paid the big bucks.
So on page 6, section 4, there's a couple of new definitions that are being added, but we'll jump to emergency shelters, which is on line 10, subdivision 39. So this language actually came from the Department of Children and Families. And I did ask that exact same question when they proposed this language, because emergency shelter is defined in our emergency management statutes and has a different definition. So the definition here is any facility, the primary purpose of which is to provide temporary shelter for the homeless in general, or for specific populations of the homeless and that doesn't require occupants to sign leases or occupancy agreements. And so the reason this term has been added here is that this is the HUD definition, and it's the definition that DCF uses when they apply for federal grants from HUD for homeless shelters. So there are a series of regulations and grant programs established at the federal level, and this is the definition they use.
Senator Parkman.
So I think this, as Randy says, this is going to be a challenge for, for some of our communities. That I am modestly concerned this adds a barrier to new shelters. On the other hand, communities would embrace a new shelter with eyes wide open. I mean, they would know going into it what they were taking on, but I worried that what we're adding may be an impediment to building new ones, but maybe we could discuss that as we go.
There's also warming shelters now that open up in cold weather. We opened them prior to COVID, in a lot of church basements to fill in the hours before the emergency shelter, the sleeping shelters opened. But you would have people in there, usually they got something to eat, it was warm. And we had them during the electric outage, warming shelters. And we have cooling. The library is a cooling place. The library is really a warming place, but not by designation. It's a lot easier for towns to say, yeah, you can open for 3 hours a night so people don't have to hang out on the streets waiting for the shelter. It's another thing to say you can be open all day, because it gets down to how many police officers are we going to have to hire. I live across from the motel that shelters homeless people. The school bus and the police cruiser are there with almost the same regularity. It's an issue. They won't allow an expansion at one of our local motels because the police don't have the capacity to respond to all the calls. So you're going to hear that from the league, but it is going to be an issue.
Right. I mean, I think, Sarah Phillips might be able to come back and talk about the examples of where they're seeing, if you restrict it here, it's still happening over here. That could be a different town, or it just could be a
Barry and Montpelier regularly exchange homes.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, then the question becomes, are we going to sort of manage, and churches, because they don't have the same restrictions, have often been taking people, and then the police have to still respond to that, if, in an ad hoc way. So I think we'll hear all the various concerns, but I think, this is, as we heard from Sarah the other day, an attempt to move people where there's more services.
I mean, towns that have police forces, the police can walk over. But if this starts to hit smaller towns where you have to wait for the sheriff, where it takes an hour or two to get law enforcement to someplace, that's going to be another issue. And you might just want to recognize that.
Yeah, if a town raises that they feel like an overflow site and they're too small to accommodate, we should hear that. I think the population centers are the ones that usually, get a high concentration of people that they have to figure out what to do with.
Certainly do.
And kind of as you noted, I mean, we have to factor in climate risks. We've had to create ad hoc cooling spaces, ad hoc warming spaces more often, especially the cooling spaces.
Yeah, that is new.
So I would just add that, so it's adding two things in relation to these shelters. It's limiting the ability of regulating hours of operation, but it's saying that in the context that overall it's putting a limitation on what aspects of the shelter that a town is able to regulate. So this is again, not allowing them to fully zone them out.
Mhm.
So they have ability to put limitations on their location, which is one thing you may want to consider more in depth, but other than the other things are sort of physical limitations, and it's different than, it is a much more limited subset of criteria that this town can zone on. And so should an applicant for one of these structures apply and meet the established criteria, they would be allowed to get their permit. So this is a very modified subset of zoning that limits how much the town can regulate these structures.
So they can regulate location, but not to the point that it
Yes,
it
they
curbs
can't zone
the
them.
full use.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you probably hear more testimony on that can be used to the town's advantage if they, that is one of the criteria that did come up.
Yeah, next to a school? I mean, is that where you wanna put a shelter?
We have them in Hartford,
Next to the school?
our homeless shelter, the Haven, who you heard from Michael yesterday, is across a big street from the high school, Midland High.
I remember a school that created a homeless shelter
Yeah.
in Rutland County because they have so many homeless families.
And so many homeless
And
kids.
there's children,
So,
children to
for
get to
fam-
the school.
Yeah, for families with kids, it actually can be quite helpful.
Right.
Right. Okay, so on page 6, there are a couple of other definitions that are being added to this section based on what we've already talked about. So the first is on line 6, duplex. So duplex means a residential building that has 2 dwelling units in the same building. For purposes of 4412E, which you will recall is the accessory dwelling unit definition. So for purposes of accessory dwelling units, in areas of a municipality served by municipal water and sewer infrastructure, each unit of a duplex shall constitute a single family dwelling unit. And so what this means is that in those sewer water districts, residential districts, each half of the duplex is a single family dwelling that can have an accessory dwelling unit. Did I say that? Each half of the duplex is a single family unit that can have an ADU. And that ties into the prior provision about up to 4 units in the sewer water districts.
Okay. Nothing would require that a community surpass their water sewer capacity.
No. And this actually doesn't none of these the provisions have been drafted so that they don't actually require the municipality to accept hookups, just that there be sewer and water in that area. And so if perhaps the municipality's infrastructure is already at capacity, or the municipality has stopped issuing connection permits, the developer still has the option then to do, I'm sorry, the word just lost me, septic, sorry. So, but it's saying that in these districts, these are the districts that,
For a multi-family house on an 1/8 of an acre lot.
we're not talking about 1/8 of an acre lots.
Okay. Okay, so to have an 1/8 of an acre, you have to have water sewer capacity. And it has to be hooked up.
And those are existing
Yeah.
non-conforming lots, so that's a separate issue for these, yes.
All you're saying here is that each unit include in a duplex has the capability of creating their own ADU.
Yes, and only in these limited districts with sewer and water infrastructure.
So if the town or whatever, the utility does have capacity, but it's a relatively expensive hookup fee, can the developer put in septic? Is it the developer's option?
Yes.
Wow. That's 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 alarming
Christopher
to
making a
me,
face.
but
So could you just say, Wendy, what?
so if there's a town that has
Right,
water
so it
and
depends.
sewer, and say, because sometimes it can cost $10,000. It can be very expensive to do a new hookup.
Mhm.
My question was, can the developer or even just the homeowner put in septic within the service area of the utility at their option?
So it's.
In
it
addition to
depends.
water and sewer
Or
already being provided?
instead of, I just think that's not good policy.
Well, why would you do that if you have water and
Because
sewer?
it could be less expensive.
Could be cheaper.
Because water can be, or sewer, I mean, it can be
Mhm.
$10,000 to connect depending on your situation. If you have long driveway or.
Yeah, but
So
to
I
dig
would
a
just-
well costs much more than that.
Well,
Can we just hold on?
Yeah.
Because this is
Okay.
like a very, that's a
That's a
very
separate- I'm
like
sorry, okay.
complicated, and I'm actually not the
This-
expert.
Right, I was gonna.
So
this
is
led it me
is
to
the,
wonder.
right, and
The
I think you will probably need to hear more about that because
Okay.
one of the sections I'm gonna get to is actually on sewer. And so you will probably hear testimony on this, but this is agnostic to that in that
Okay,
it's using this phrase as a proxy for smart growth areas.
okay,
Right, so this language was trying to winnow down what areas of the town should encourage dense development.
Right.
And not speaking to whether or not specifically there was capacity or any of those issues,
Okay.
because they are very town dependent and system dependent. And there may be layers to that, and so that's why it is drafted neutrally to avoid whether or not the connections can actually happen, and just sort of distinguishing that these areas hopefully are able to connect, but even if they're not able to connect, these are the smart growth areas.
okay, and they have certain rights by being in that area?
Yes.
Okay,
And
got
we
it.
should all just keep in mind, we have like a don't shoot the messenger policy.
Oh, yeah,
No,
totally. No, and I
Council
wasn't-
has a
I wasn't-
limitation.
But right, and I'm not, and I do think you should have a lot more discussion on
Right,
it. I just
yes.
won't be able to like further give you the proper
Yes.
law, sewer law is very complicated.
Right,
And so,
totally.
yes,
All right, and I didn't mean to get us off on a
Yeah.
tangent.
No, tangents are good. We just want to make sure Ledge Council could only.
Oh, yeah,
so much.
yeah.
Yeah,
We don't
Yeah.
want anyone to
you
feel-
have
And-
partners who will. tell.
yes, and we can, and the sewer attorney isn't even on your schedule for today, but I'm sure you may
We have
need
a
to talk-
sewer.
Who is our sewer
So
attorney?
Mike O'Grady.
Mike O'Grady,
Oh,
Mike O'Grady is our,
All
what
I
an
book
exciting
him now, he's hard to get.
That's right, that's why I'm here.
He
Um,
does things all to do with manure and sewer.
Waste,
all that kind of
water,
wastewater
wildlife.
stuff.
Yes,
There's a
yes.
bad joke here.
I know, there is a bad joke, and actually there's a great cabaret.
So,
Okay, got it.
we can definitely talk about more, I'm just trying to be cognizant of your time too.
We have nothing.
Okay. Okay.
So, but those are issues that you do want to think through, and the definition of duplex too. So these are policy choices you have the ability to weigh in on.
And then we can ask the bill sponsor, we'll have other witnesses that can help us.
Okay.
I still stand still. Yeah.
And our definition of ADUs, you're changing here in the page we already flagged.
Yep.
So is it not then appropriate for us to have the definition of ADU here, or are you excluding that? I mean, given you're changing it, I mean, I've already made clear my feelings about that change. If we do change it, it would be included here because it would be a change in definition.
Oh my gosh, this is such a great grammar question because the editors raised this yesterday.
Oh, I'm
So-
just channeling my inner.
And we had like
Nadine.
a really fun conversation about stylistic grammar. The answer is I don't know, but no. Except that technically there isn't, so what we're
Don't
looking at
know,
right
but
now
no.
is the definitions section of Title 24, Chapter 117 that lays out the definitions for the chapter. Accessory dwelling unit has not previously appeared on the definition list. It's been defined by its parameters in 4412E. So it doesn't have a formal definition.
So maybe we should consider
So you
having a formal
Can
definition.
do that, and the editors came to talk to me about, they did raise this issue. And it's an interesting question, and it's more of a grammar than actual like legal question, and so you can consider that, yes.
Stylistic. And if you
Once
want it.
we get everything else settled.
Right.
And once we agree, That would be helpful.
Right.
Thank you. I'm
Okay,
so glad I'm channeling. my
Good
Alex.
question.
Municipal sludge, I am back in my element.
No
so
pun intended.
the other definition here is multi-unit or multifamily dwelling. And both duplex and multifamily, both number 38 and 40 are being proposed to be added just because these definitions have never been defined in the statute. And so I hope they are adding clarity, but if they're not, you can definitely wordsmith these. So these means a building that contains 3 or more dwelling units in the same building. Okay. Section 5 at the bottom of page 6 is 24 VSA 4441. So this is actually a different topic, again, still related to municipal
Sorry.
zoning. Yes.
Do you want to go back? or-
Sorry, before we disappear,
Mhm.
just given our discussion of ADUs, thinking outside the box, as it were, in multi-unit, would we not also want to say in the same building or on the same lot?
So that is a question.
Like a contiguous,
Or like,
yeah.
you know, you could have a duplex and then you could have a carriage house that you then added another unit over and maybe had another bit of land.
We're
So
defining a dwelling as having a building that contains 3 or more units. So we might have like a multifamily property, which I think.
Or a multi-unit property.
Or a multi-unit property, which a property I think is more of a lot than a
Anyway, I just
dwelling.
added as a
Yeah.
question for us to look at. as
Right,
we go
that's,
through.
yeah, you love definitions.
I do.
Everywhere,
They're important.
yes.
Oh, as we
Yeah.
discovered.
Okay.
Okay, so this next section 5 is a different angle on all this, but still related. So at the bottom of page 6, when considering an amendment to a bylaw, the planning commission shall prepare and approve a written report on the proposal. So that's existing law, they're currently required to do. So on page 7, you will see that there's language struck on line 3 that says, the department shall provide the municipalities the form for this report. So that's being struck because it's being moved down farther on the page. That isn't changing, it's just being moved because additional elements are being added. And so, so on page 7, the report shall provide a brief explanation of proposed bylaw amendment or repeal and shall include a statement of purpose under, for notice under 4444, and shall include findings regarding how the proposal conforms with or furthers the goals and policies contained in the municipal plan, including the effect of the proposal on the ability of safe and affordable housing, and sections 4412, 13, and 14. So those were the first 3 sections that you amended in this bill: the parking, the limitations on zoning, and then that last section, that other section on homeless shelters, including all of the other additional language that are in there. But so this is specifically calling out that when the municipality provides the report on this, they have to address how they've included the elements of those sections in their bylaws. So jumping down, the other small changes there are just grammar changes. So they're still required to do this report, but jumping down to line 16, upon adoption or amendment of a bylaw, the planning commission shall prepare an adoption report in form and content provided by the Department of Housing and Community Development that
Right.
confirms that all the changes to zoning districts have been uploaded to the Vermont Open Geodata portal,
Right.
confirms that the complete bylaw has been uploaded to the municipal plan and bylaw database, demonstrates conformity with 4412, 13, and 14, and provides information on the municipal application of subchapter 7, which is the bylaw chapter, administration, which is the process of part of this, and then 10, which is about the panels and how they issue permits for the municipal planning data center and the prospective development of a statewide zoning atlas.
You're getting more than a map.
It's
You're getting an atlas.
I love that. I love that.
Perspective development.
Yes, and I have gone back and forth
Yeah.
about the use of that word, but it doesn't exist yet, and
It's,
so.
it's in the works.
Mhm.
It really is.
Yes, we're hoping. Key people are on it
Great,
and key partners are on it.
good.
And so this whole section is actually asking for municipalities to
right.
contribute data for that use. And so ongoing into the future, as they do updates, they will be contributing this information so that the state can have a database and a mapped atlas of all of these provisions. I'm sure somebody in this room would
I know,
love to
right?
talk more about this with you.
You'll hear more. but
And
yeah.
some of us are thrilled with this because this information we need to do better planning.
Does the state require that all towns have planning and zoning?
No, only about half of towns have
That's what I
zoning,
thought.
planning and zoning.
So I could do away with my town planning and zoning if I didn't want to do this. There would be risks.
There would be
Or-
risks.
That would be a-
Yes.
Or
Major decision to not
I
adopt.
could, if I were a nice town that didn't want this things in it, I could just say, we don't have planning and zoning and we just wouldn't allow any of these.
Or we could then,
There would be other repercussions.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
would be.
I mean, you're
Right.
still subject to Act 250.
We haven't even
In
talked
fact,
about
at a
Act
low,
250
at a lower level, a lower
Yeah.
threshold kicks you into it.
Yeah, okay.
So, and
I've been
I,
sitting next to McDonald. He knows how to game every system.
and I would just add that they already are required to do this report and have been for a while. It is expanding the amount of information they need to include in it. If you want to consider what kind of enforcement could be on this, I mean, it's not clear immediately to me. I can look into what the department's enforcement authority would be on this, but I don't think it's.
I don't think we need
criminal
to
penalties
go
or-
there yet. That'll just
Right.
get everybody's hackles
And
up.
just to look at
town
the positive
clerks will
side,
have-
it becomes an incentive. You get more resources, more grant
You get-
opportunities. you know.
Exactly.
A lot of people
But
want
who's,
more freedom.
if, in some of these towns, it may well be the town clerks that do it.
Mhm.
They may well have a few things to say about being asked to do more things with no money.
We haven't gotten to the, no, there may be money.
Oh, okay, then they will.
So don't go there
Well,
yet.
there may be money in here, you're right. I think we haven't gotten there yet. Yeah, that's in here.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're gonna get them extra money, that will probably be okay.
Depending on the source of money.
That's also.
Well, that's for the three of you to discuss. And, well, we can discuss it.
Yeah, and I'll have more questions later on this.
We hope on the whole thing.
Right, well, just, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
I'm just
Well,
thinking,
There's certain things we'll keep massaging in committee, and there's some we might start to ask people like, can you, work on it outside of committee and bring a new proposal back in, that kind of thing, just, we haven't hit that point yet.
Right.
Everything we flagged, we'll try to address in committee until we feel like it needs some time in the cafeteria with other stakeholders.
yeah, what I'm gonna have a question on is
Just
whether
less
this should be
space.
the state's responsibility or the municipality's responsibility, because the state could start doing this now and just have blanks to be filled in. Which I think, rather than waiting for the municipalities to send things, I mean, the state has a lot of
We
information
can
already.
ask DHCD what they try to do that's in their jurisdiction and where they do have holes,
Using
I mean,
their
there
access
is-
resources.
There is already the atlas, there's a really nice atlas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
so I think it's just.
Put another layer.
Mhm.
Oh, so easy.
I know it's not easy, but it's important. And
Yeah.
this, to me, makes it an obligation of the towns rather than an obligation of the state. So that, we don't have to talk about it now, but
Now that we're walking through language, what you'll start to experience as a legislator is people will magically find you that have been watching to tell you their thoughts on what you
Sure.
raised in committee. So
sure,
I think that's generally a good thing. Anything you say
I'm happy.
out loud
to-
here,
yeah.
people might want to give you their thoughts or, ask to come in to speak.
I would love that.
So.
Yeah, sometimes I.
You may or may not.
And I say, someone out there knows.
Exactly.
Someone out there has input.
Yeah.
Okay, so page 8, section A5 or 5A, and sorry, this is a working draft, so this got sort of stuck in last minute, but this is again related to this zoning and municipal zoning, but this is a slightly different topic within zoning, and this is actually on appeals. So 4465 are appeals of decisions of the administrative officer. So after you go through, zoning is established when someone wants to build or make a change into some building, they probably have to get a permit from the town. And so 4465 lays out those procedures, and this includes a provision that says, for the provision of this chapter, an interested person means any one of the following, and it is striking all of subdivision 4, which states that any 10 persons who may be any combination of voters or real property owners within a municipality may be an interested person, and an interested person is someone who can appeal a zoning decision. So this entire section is being struck, and so it's eliminating this ability of 10 people within the town from appealing a zoning decision.
And can you tell us who that leaves? Because it still probably leaves the joiners.
Right, it leaves the other people who have been participating in the application to that point, which are the applicant for the permit, the landowner, if it's someone else, the property abutters who are directly adjoining, and I think state agencies who are relevant information, but I'm certainly get
Sorry,
that.
so it keeps
The person owning title to the property, or a municipality or a solid waste management district, who is affected.
or a neighbor.
Yeah, I didn't get there yet.
Okay.
There's a whole list here. So,
So maybe instead of listing it now, let's flag that for our next conversation and bring
okay.
the list of who it still includes.
Yeah, and one of the questions as you talk about the butters is whether or not that is something that could be manipulated. In other words, to keep or to prevent appeals.
How do you
If I own a piece of property,
manipulate a
if I
butter?
have a property surrounding me, then I have dealt with all the butters.
You want new about
No, because the
Right.
butter, they move to the.
No, I don't use the property that I bought around as part of this project. I just simply use it for insulation from appeals. I can manipulate this.
Well,
I think that's an interesting question, a very
The donut hole.
large legal question. But I don't, if we all want to think about how to game things. but
Expensive
I don't do that.
anyway, flag.
Yeah,
So
it's
for
all
further
flagged,
discussion,
yeah.
but I think instead of going through them individually now, let's just, if you bring the list, who's still included and still could appeal, that'd be great.
Senator Brock has been sitting with Senator McDonald. for a
Oh,
long
I'm
time.
sure it's had
Years, yeah.
influence. I am sure, after all these years.
It could make the building longer, but we may want to leave all the other people who can appeal in the bill and just strike one so that when it stands alone.
But
we'll look at it.
the people that don't like Act 2.
This is zoning.
That 10 people
Yeah.
in town, nobody on this parking garage in Montpelier abutted the parking garage.
Mhm.
One of them didn't even live in
Yeah, it
town.
could be manipulated in both directions.
I just want to make sure we know it's zoning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the definition under Act 250 is different. So this is just for municipal zoning appeals. Yeah.
This
And where
is
do
just,
these appeals go?
To the environmental court.
Oh, okay,
And then
same place, right?
Which means
Yes.
add at least a year.
Okay.
but remember, one of our challenges in some of these developments has been the unending number of appeals.
Oh,
yeah.
And
yes,
so,
I understand.
as we say, we want to not eliminate appeals, because some appeals are so appropriate, but having represented a town that had 10 years of appeals to stymie a now incredibly successful affordable housing project, we need to address this both in zoning and in Act 250. So I think, we need to address it where we need to address it and be thoughtful about it.
Okay, this,
Sorry, and I misstated that. This specific section is the zoning is the first level of appeal, and so it would go to the DRB. Then it would go to the environmental court, then it would go to the Supreme Court. So this is the
That's
first
fine.
level of appeal.
Okay,
Thank you.
and the skid, well, I guess we're gonna bring that back. The appealers could be in a budding town.
Yes.
I'm just thinking,
I
the
believe so.
complaints I'm getting about a certain landfill and the trucks going through it.
Mhm.
So if I'm gonna put something there, if the trucks are going through the neighboring
But,
town,
yeah, but highly unlikely for something in the downtown and village center, which is what this is.
that's downtown, okay, but it could.
This isn't specific.
Woodstock
This
doesn't
is,
like
okay,
trucks.
so this is out
This is
beyond the
zoning,
down.
this is like, I mean.
This is
it's a
townwide.
decision.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And we know certain towns don't like trucks going through them to the neighboring towns.
Certain towns no longer have that ability to limit the trucks going through their downtown and village centers. Sad.
All right, page 9, section 6. We're still in the topic of municipal zoning, but zooming in specifically to subdivisions. So section 6 amends 4463, which is subdivision review, which is an element that towns have the ability to review and condition. So approval of plats. Before a plat for a major subdivision is approved, a public hearing on the plat shall be held by the appropriate municipal panel after public notice. A bylaw may provide for the administrative officer to approve minor subdivisions. So two things are happening here. This is empowering towns to allow their administrative officer, instead of the full panel, to approve minor subdivision plats. And also it's stating that a public hearing is only needed for a major subdivision plat. Currently, that distinction doesn't happen in law. Some towns have made distinctions in their bylaws already, and some towns have actually already done this. But I think a concern was raised that it wasn't clear in the statute, and so this is empowering towns. If they want to make that distinction, they can, but also it's only requiring a public hearing on a major subdivision.
And what, do we define a major subdivision?
No.
Oh. So that would be helpful, I think, wouldn't it be?
That is a policy decision. So yes, there is no definition here. If you didn't provide a definition, the town would have the ability to define it for themselves.
It's kind of permissive language, you can,
Yeah, what's a
your
minor
process.
development in
Right,
Chittenden
exactly.
County might be a major development in Essex County.
Or, yeah, okay.
and we might hear there's not disagreement about this because it's just permissive to help clarify. I don't know, we might hear otherwise, but.
I did consider whether or not a definition was needed and did not proceed with one. So you have that option if you'd like to.
Someone raises it for you.
Can we say, if we decide not to have a definition, can we state in here that towns are authorized to
Yeah.
define?
Yeah, we can be more
Just to make it
precise.
clear.
Yeah, okay.
Because otherwise you have the ability to have a dispute if they didn't hold a hearing and someone thinks they should have.
Right. So,
And they could still hold a public hearing for minor subdivisions if they wanted to. This
Right.
doesn't prevent that. It
Right.
just
No.
means that they don't have to. And
It is
it's their
permissive.
choice to use an administrative officer.
Yeah.
Great.
Senator Clarkson.
a plat, I'm sorry, but a platting hair, a plot,
It's a
yes.
standard real
I-
estate term.
And it's interesting because we have actually not dealt with it so much here. I don't, I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I don't remember, well, don't answer that. But I have not, I don't feel like we have, so it is a standard real estate term, okay, what does it mean?
I think everything in the Midwest is laid out in plats.
So the dictionary
Well, here
definition
too.
is, quote, a plot of land.
So why not use the word plot?
Plat. that's
No,
the
my plat is
dictionary
a thing that defines the boundaries of the lots. Like when you were talking about combining two 1/8
Yeah.
acre lots, you get,
Okay.
and so you would replat them,
You would,
is my
yes.
understanding.
Ellen, do you want
Flat.
us to defer to Chris Cochran?
I absolutely do not.
Okay. I didn't know if you wanted time to find the
I can just
definition.
hear him back there.
That's
I know
fine.
it.
It's a good thing you don't
It
have to
really is
look
up
at
to
it,
the witness in this.
but he
Oh,
is
sorry.
still smiling.
Because
I was just checking to double check if this section already has plat defined. I believe plat defined is defined in Act 250. So I will just quickly give
That's-
my understanding of it, and he can fill in if you'd like him to. A plat is the legal document that lays out the plan for the plot of land that is filed in the land
A
record.
plan for a plot is a plat. There you go.
Oh,
There you go.
a plan for a
Perhaps
plot
somebody
is a
We're
had
getting
plan.
into a lot of alliteration here.
That is good.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
But it's what, there is a definition in Act 250, so I assume it's similar. In Act 250, it's defined as the map or chart of a subdivision with surveyed lot lines and dimensions. And that is what's
That's
filed
what
in the
you-
It's
list.
like you plant your food, you plant your.
It's too early to be this punchy. I feel like we just.
I know, and
It's
I'm
Friday.
gonna have to
We're
listen
allowed to be,
Friday.
it's Friday.
We're doing all this zoning too.
Well, and there's another P in there because it's a map or chart of a parcel.
Yes.
I've been hanging around grandsons and I could start to do some really good alliteration.
You could be a rapper. You could have like a
Good.
second or third career.
No, but actually, I have a
Realtor,
grandson
mayor.
who was really good at the Macarena, and he could do this.
I see more cabaret acts.
Yeah, but some are inside jokes that shouldn't
Yeah.
be cabaret acts. Someone else will get it, but continue on.
So, the language that's reflected in the rest of this section refers to the option of adding the administrative officer. So down in line 18, plat record, the approval of the appropriate municipal panel or administrative officer if the bylaws provide for their approval of subdivision, of minor subdivisions, shall expire 180 days from the approval or certification unless the plat has been duly filed or recorded. So that is, I think, one of the big aspects of plats, that they are what's filed in the land record. And they expire if you don't, so you need to do that quickly. And so then again, on page 10, that same language is added farther down, starting on line 7, no plat showing a new street or highway may be filed or recorded in the office of the clerk of the municipality unless it has been approved by the appropriate municipal panel or appropriate administrative officer if allowed under the bylaws pursuant to subdivision A of this section. So again, just further reflecting the administrative officer's authority if it's been granted to them. So then section 7 is actually directly related to this still, 4418 on subdivision bylaws. So subdivision bylaws may include, and then on page 11, line 15, provisions to allow the administrative officer to approve minor subdivisions. So just tying all that up.
I have.
Okay, we might go one or two more pages.
That's fine, I just looked,
There's nothing, yeah.
there's,
We're on the floor in 6 minutes.
I'm meeting the Taiwanese Council at Capitol Plaza in 6 minutes.
Wow.
And it's they do a real good job of maintaining relationships with the people they've taken to Taiwan.
I was gonna say, the junkets.
But they also, I think it's a rowing company up in Lamoille County that makes rowing.
Yes, concept.
Yes,
Concept.
well, they are a major backer of that. They have put whole high-tech labs into colleges. They invest money in the states.
Thank you for being our economic
Thank
development
you.
It is,
ambassador.
and so we are, do
And
that.
that means
They-
you may have
they
a
do like
fabulous
to
time with
get-
this lunch.
Yes, they do like to get jet planes and a few other things.
Okay, have a ball.
Not from us, not on the public side.
Bring
I
some-
just want to be clear.
Bring back any appropriate food items.
No,
Hi.
it's Capitol Plaza.
Well, it might stretch their kitchen, which would be interesting.
I don't think so.
I don't know, do you think we can get one more section in before the bell rings?
I think I am confident.
Okay,
So, at the bottom of page 11, section 8 starts. So this is still in municipal zoning, but it's again on appeals. So 4471 and appeals to the environmental division. So the language that is on page 12 is not a substantive change. It is a clarification of existing law, and it really just reads better. So line 1, notwithstanding subsection A, a determination by an appropriate municipal panel, so like the DRB, that a residential development will not result in an undue adverse effect on the character of the area affected shall not be subject to appeal if the proposed residential development seeking a conditional use approval under 44-14-3 of this title is within a designated downtown development district, designated growth center, or designated neighborhood development area. Other elements of the determination made by the appropriate municipal panel may be appealed. So I consider this to be a clarification of existing language. If you read the language that's struck, I think it is very confusing of what, and there have been questions raised on what this section actually allowed to do. So this, in a designated area, if a town finds that a residential development is within the character of the area, that this language says that that cannot be appealed in court.
If it's allowable. If it's allowable in that part of the world, it can't be
No.
appealed.
If-
No.
If the town finds that a residential development is within the character of the area, so if they approve it,
We passed this last year, I thought.
so this is existing language, and there was a concern raised that the language is unclear of what is allowed. And so I think the major clarification is the last sentence, which says that other elements can be appealed. So, yes, this is saying character of the area cannot be appealed
Right.
if a town finds it. Someone can't challenge that. And so, yes, it is existing law, but it has been suggested that it is legally unclear what this section did specifically. All right. The next section is big.
Okay,
So by right,
By right.
well,
Yeah.
given we have 2 minutes and we
Yeah.
haven't been digged
I
yet.
know it's.
Oh, it's flashing. We need
Oh,
to,
it didn't ring. Okay,
but it's flashing.
yes. Ellen,
Thank you.
wonderful
Yeah.
job. Got us to page 12.
I think
So
we're whizzing along. I
Yes.
think we're doing well.
this is a very weighty section, so we'll continue this on Tuesday and we'll try to fit witnesses in who aren't our usual suspects, who aren't easy to move, but otherwise we'll just continue to walk through and hear from housing advocates as we go next week.